fast, so we start really hands-on speaking all of you and just stop listening. You received so many inputs yesterday and today about Rijeka, about rehab, a lot of examples, and now it's up to you. This is the third of a series of HUL Historic Urban Landscape workshop, and what we are going to do today is try to understand what are the good practices and adaptive reuse of cultural heritage. In these good practices, what are the challenges, what are the barriers, what are the problems, what is not working or could work better, and try to brainstorm and understand how we can overcome these kind of downsides. Be creative, there is no right or wrong, just think of everything and anything that comes to your mind. It can be something at the national level, and local level, and European level. It can be something cultural related, it can be legislative, can be something related to the social environment, environmental. Really, there is nothing wrong. Be very creative. We were in a former kindergarten and children are creative. Kind of feel the sense of place and get inspired on that. You heard yesterday Professor Girard introduced the recommendation. You heard about the historic urban landscape today and yesterday, and now Dr. Dennis, please. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, most of you are already quite familiar with the historic urban landscape approach and the recommendation. So I'll just very briefly emphasize here the steps of implementing the historic urban landscape approach to the local context, because that is what we are going to focus here in the workshop. So as you might have seen, there are 6 tables, because there are like 6 steps of implementing the historic urban landscape approach. Actually, as you all know, I'll very briefly pass through it. The historic urban landscape recommendation was adopted in 2011 by UNESCO, and it was the first international doctrinal document on urban heritage that has been issued by UNESCO in 35 years. So there has been a long absence in that sense. So it is vital that now it has one foot on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Target 11.4, which emphasizes the importance of cultural and natural heritage for safe and resilient cities, and one foot on the New Urban Agenda, which also emphasizes integrated approaches. And the historic urban landscape approach, in that sense, as an approach, provides an integrated and a holistic and a value-based manner to integrate urban conservation and adaptive reuse of built heritage into the wider urban development and management frameworks. So I mean, it's very brief, but as the definition for those who are not very familiar with, it extends beyond the definition of the limited notion of historic center, the historic city, the ensemble, and takes into account the larger perspective of all the cultural, both tangible and intangible values and attributes, and the natural ones, and brings them into this wider urban landscape context and geographic setting. Since the adoption of the historic urban landscape recommendation, it has been tested in a number of pilot cities, such as the island of Mozambique, the Shanghai, Amsterdam, and also there have been numerous case studies where some of the tools that it has provided have been implemented and tested. Here you can see several examples of it. What's important to emphasize here is that every city is unique with its own qualities, with its own contents, the values, the attributes, and also with its own barriers, the challenges, the complexities that it faces, and also the solutions that it brings to cope with these challenges. So it is also very important to emphasize here the unique and the originality of each local context, and how actually the steps of implementation that the recommendation proposes and the toolkit that it provides, how important it is to adapt it into the local context. I'll now go through the steps, because that's what we are going to discuss here. As Nadia emphasized, Here we are going to discuss about the barriers and like the problems, the bottlenecks that have been faced either at the local level, in Rijeka, in the cases that we visited, in Galep, in Rehab, in the Riverside. Also, I mean, you know, and what kind of solutions they have been proposed, and you know, how to cope with these like the barriers. So one of the steps is about mapping resources. So one table will be all about mapping. Here in the morning, Professor also explained about the mappings that have been done in the cultural context of the city of Rijeka. There are also many different other types of mappings, like before conducting adaptive reuse practice or a regeneration project. You know, there are many surveys, mappings, and plans, assessments, analysis, either spatial, cultural, social, that have been conducted on the site. And there are also many barriers associated with that. You know, there are many challenges that are encountered in the case of making these assessments and the mappings. So this is one of the things that we are going to discuss in table 1, that is on mapping. Step 2 is about reaching consensus. So it's through participatory planning and stakeholder consultation, just like we did in the HIPs, in order to identify the key values and attributes, and you know, what are the values attributed to the site. We also mentioned that as Rijeka is going to be the capital city, the European capital of culture, so there are certain values that would like to be emphasized in the terms of to create an image for the city as the capital of the culture. So what are these values? Who defines these values? That is what we are going to discuss in table 2. What are the problems that are, the barriers that are faced in the identification of the values and attributes? You know, who participates in their identification? Which actors, which partners? So it's also quite important. Step 3, which will be the table 3, it focuses on vulnerabilities. So we did the site visit yesterday, you know, so we are talking about riverside, connecting with the river, but there are also many different threats and impacts and vulnerabilities of these sites. There might be like natural hazards, such as the threat of flooding, the impacts of climate change, you know, also for instance in the case of Galep, you know, the ship was quite deteriorated, so there are all these other concerns that needs to be taken into account, different barriers, so different vulnerabilities that will be taken into consideration. So that is the problems, like the solutions that we are going to discuss in table 3. Table 4 will be on integration. So I mean, we discussed that the process, the importance of the historic urban landscape approach is about identifying, integrating the conservation, urban heritage conservation and adaptive reuse into the wider context of urban development and management. So how we can do this integration, how we can get into the larger picture, the larger image, to the wider framework, or the legislative, regulatory, and planning framework. So how we can integrate this adaptive reuse practices to the wider image. That is what we are going to discuss in table 4 over there. So step 5, which is also table 5, is about prioritization. So the actions that are going to be prioritized for conservation. So who decides on which actions to be prioritized? Which values that need to be prioritized? Who decides on that? So these are what we are going to discuss in table 5. What are the barriers there? You know, about deciding on whether the prioritizing actions and strategies. Step 6, table 6 is about partnerships. We've talked about the partnerships, the public-private partnerships, and you know what actors are going to be involved, what have been the struggles there, you know, involving all the local communities, for instance, or all the local actors. You know, different actors are taken into consideration in terms of different projects. In Galep, there is the Port Authority, engineers, and many other different actors, which are different than the Rehab example, for instance. So these are the things that we are going to discuss in table 6. So this is what we have to keep in mind, actually. And in addition to these steps, the historic urban landscape recommendation also provides a continually evolving toolkit. So it's, as I said, it's not a very rigid toolkit, so it can be extended to many different examples, which have been used in many different cases. So it's always good to work on cases, just like in the case of Rijeka, to identify what kind of different tools and strategies and policies have been adapted and implemented, which can also contribute to the bigger image, let's say. So these tools are civic engagement tools, like community tools that are used to empower diverse cross-section of stakeholders. Knowledge and planning tools, so these are about the monitoring and management of all the tangible and intangible values. The regulatory system, so it includes the legislations, regulations, policies, plans, legal acts, so all these tools, and financial tools, which we've also discussed a lot in the past 2 days. You know, what kind of financial models, the financial tools, building capacity or income generating development tools have been instrumented. So that's what we are going to discuss. So these tools are important in the sense that in the workshop we'll discuss both the barriers and bottlenecks, but also the solutions that can be or have been implemented, and these solutions will be associated with these 4 tools that I mentioned here. Is it clear for everyone now? Okay, then we can skip through the conduct of today's workshop.
Well, this is the agenda, but it's no longer valid, so I will skip it. We will have 6 rounds. Every round will last 25 minutes, and Dunya will help us keep the schedule and be very on time, because a little time what you are asked to be is to act as a team. In each table you discuss in a interdisciplinary way, in a cross-sectoral fashion, each point, from the perspective of that table, which mapping, consensus, and blah, blah, blah. Each round, how it's structured, in 2 parts. The first part is more individual. You have some facilitators helping you, reminding you, so don't worry, it's a lot of information that I'm bombing with, but they will guide you in the process. You will have this booklet to help you write down and guide you in your reflection for each tool, and then we will be 10 and 15 minutes all together discussing what you have identified, what the solution you find, maybe someone has another solution to that, or maybe use that tool or that tool could be better. And I ask you to identify one point, just one point of the whole discussion we have at that table as a representative one that we will share at the very end of the workshop. So at the back-end table we will have you, please do raise your hand so that you can ask you, seek at the consensus. I will be sitting at the vulnerability table. Dennis will facilitate the integration table. Prior presentation will be. Sorry, I skipped my tool. Sylvia. Sorry, my bad. Then we will have Martina and finally Marco at the last table. My bad. I will skip it. Just think of everything. It can be a barrier that is related of some people in a certain wall. It can be related to a management philosophy and more, which does not really fit in the purpose of the adaptiveness you are trying to do, from some sort of conflicts or these little things. Marco already explained before what were some of the barriers that were already identified during the Irish International Partnership that can be a starting point for your reflection. And just briefly, let's make an example. So let's take, you have on your tables the booklets, you might take them so you follow me. Let's fly for a moment. We will just think about partnership, for example. We will fly in Australia. The city of Ballard has identified this barrier, in particular, so we will do the cross barrier. You will say, where is this barrier? What is the relation to Ballard in this case? The barrier is this empowerment of the community. We will provide some more information, and in this case, for example, the younger are not involved in all the processes when it comes to adaptive regeneration of the city. And And then we will make a clear link because you can have two barriers that are not related. You might have a solution that is not related to the barrier. It should be strange, but it can happen. It happened before. So, and the solution was empowering this community. How? Well, brief description and identified two tools in this case. They created a policy for the engagement of these targets groups, and they also created websites, so an engagement tool in this case. That was here. So, yeah. And also, each time you will choose, kind of circulating among tables, what is the next table you want to sit in. So, really be free. You can start from mapping, then going to vulnerabilities, then going to partnership. Just circulate. Two more things. Well, of course, enjoy your workshop if you can read this message. So try to mind when you write down. That's what is this person wrote down for me is enjoy the historic urban landscape workshop while you have to leave. And try to be as clear as possible because, for example, also as Professor Host mentioned before, tourism can be a very positive or negative thing. So if you drop just the word tourism, it's hard to read it.